Hey, I'm Ced Hawkins. Welcome to the CedTalks Podcast. My two guests today are two great women. I'm glad to showcase their talents here on the show today, and I hope you guys are touched by their stories and what they bring to the table today. Without further ado, here is Taylor and Madison Burnett. Taylor and Madison, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I was telling y'all before we started recording, I've been trying to get y'all on the show for months now, but I've been so busy with school and stuff, I haven't had the time to get stuff situated, but I'm glad we can do this.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you guys doing mentally? It's May, it's Mental Health Month, People ask you how you're doing, you say good, but when you really sit down and think about it, how are you guys doing from a mental standpoint?
I will say, since we've been at home, I think I'm in a better place. I will say, last year when we first got sent home for, quarantine and everything, my mental health completely took a toll because it's just, this is my first time being at home for this long since I was probably, 17. So I'm in my 20s now. So it was just, a lot of things, I have to deal with mentally. So I think now I'm in a better place. So I think, I'm still trying to find things to, build my mental health and, make it stronger. But I think I'm in a good place. So, yeah, that's how I am right now.
That's good.
For me, quarantine, it was a roller coaster. It was very up and down for me. And I think therapy brought up a lot of things that I thought, you're in school or you're at work, so you don't really have to think about it. But it's different, when you're at home and you're surrounded by everybody. It's oh, okay. I didn't realize a lot of things. So, interesting enough, I started therapy because of the pandemic. And it has been a very liberating experience. So, I was okay. So, I feel now since I've started therapy, it's become a lot better.
Yeah, that's good. Was it a big adjustment given that you guys were on campus and then you were pretty much forced to come back home?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was weird because when we got sent home at Hampton, they said that we were only going to be here for 2 weeks. I think we got sent home the last week of April, and then they said you'd be back. No, sorry, the last week of March, and they said you'd be back the first or second week of April. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. And then they said, no, y'all are going to be at home until further notice. So it was just crazy because, you go to college. My goal to go to college was to get out of Maryland, but to get right back here, I was this was not the goal.
Right.
But it was a hard transition because, you're in your 20s, you like your independence and everything. And then, virtual schooling was a big adjustment for me because I'm the type of person, I want to be in the classroom, interacting with my professors and things like that. So having to do all that behind the screen was just, it was just gave you, I wasn't motivated for it. So that was one of my biggest transitions. And also, I like my independence. So, being at home under my parents' roof right now, it's all right. This was cute when we first got here, but it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My transition was a little different because I graduated in 2019 and then I came home, but then I started working. I was at NIH, and then I didn't stop working at NIH until December of 2020. So for me, even though I was at home, I was at work most of the time. So it wasn't okay, I had to be in one place at the time. But at the time that we were in quarantine, I was studying for the MCAT. I was taking in-person classes and I was working. So having to transition, doing all that on the campus of NIH to coming home, it was a huge transition. And then I got into grad school last year.
Got you.
And then having to do graduate school level work behind the screen was extremely taxing because like Madison, I'm the type of person, I need to be, in person. I need to be in front of a teacher. I need that structure where it's okay, it's 8:05, I'm not late for class, and you log in.
Right.
I need structure enough to be okay, you need to be here at a certain time to be able to get done what you need to get done.
Yeah, my transition was strange because I was actually happy that I could get to go home because I was taking 5 classes full time. So just the fact that I could do my work at home, because I've always been self-sufficient. I like being in front of the professor, but I like doing the work on my own time. Yeah. So when we got sent home, it's oh, this is great. I can sit home for 2 to 3 weeks, do my work at home. I can recharge my batteries and get right back to it so I can close the semester. Yeah. And then once I found out we weren't coming back, I was man, this sucks because I'd really gotten close to the people in my classes, and then all of a sudden that's just taken away. Yeah. And then I got no graduation because I graduated and got my associate, so that disappointed me.
And congratulations on that too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because I think even in the pandemic, a lot of people don't get graduations, but I still think those accomplishments need to be celebrated. Yeah. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. It's weird to know that I have my associate associates. Like, I was just talking with my advisor the other day, and she was like, you should be proud. Like, you got your associates. Like, most people in a pandemic, exactly, right in the beginning.
Yeah.
But like, I'm glad that you went to therapy in the beginning, because I didn't go to therapy. I want to say until September. That's when I started my treatment again. Like, I had stopped in January, and I felt like, okay, like I think I'll be good. Then once the pandemic started, like, I wish I had went back and gotten treatment, because it's like, I pushed through and I got through it, but I really wish I had like my therapist to coach me and help me out along the way.
And I actually condone going to therapy because I'm a psych major and I work in my university counseling center, so I do counsel. I'm not licensed yet, but I still like counsel students, and I really encourage it because I think during this pandemic, a lot of people have realized that we keep busy to avoid a lot of our mental health issues. And I think a lot of people, especially college students, like, we just get hit with a lot. Like, college is not a walk in the park. Like, people go through life experiences, and I really feel like therapy is there to help you. I know there's a lot of stigma, especially in the Black community, especially going to a HBCU, like, you see a lot of those stigmas, but I really condone a lot of people, especially like my friends, they started therapy in the pandemic. So I think it's a good source to use.
How has that been for you? Like, I know you said it was great for you, but like, has it done like exceptional wonders for you?
It's starting to. I think for therapy, the thing that I had to realize was I wasn't really good at like listening to like how I felt. I guess like the solution to everything for me would always be, well, I didn't like that. And then my therapist would be like, well, why? And I'm like, girl, I just told you I didn't like it, and that should be the end of it. And she's like, no, like, you have to explore those things. So I think for me, it's been a tool to help me get to know me better, And I think by getting to know me and understanding me, I can become a better student. I can become a better person, and that way I can go at life in a better perspective, And it's liberating, and I say that a lot, but it felt like expressing yourself and expressing your feelings. It felt like a weight is lifted off your shoulders, because it's like, I don't have to like bury that anymore,
Right. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, my father, he passed away in September of last year. So that's like the third week straight of the semester. So it's like, I went to therapy. Thank you. I went to therapy and stuff like that. But like, as you said, I really wasn't going in depth. So it's like, I'm getting treatment and stuff, but like, I'm not really going in depth with what's really on my mind. So once my session's over with, it's like, I had all these things I wanted to say. And it's like, I write it down and stuff, but it's like, I'm not talking to her about it. And let's say I have a better session, like the next time we meet, I'm still not addressing those issues that are bothering me. And so like, it'll always just sneak up on me. So like, I definitely understand now with like the importance of going in depth, talking about how you feel, because that's how you get closure.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what I had to learn that in therapy too. And I'm like, sometimes like I go bi-weekly, and sometimes I'm like, girl, I need a session every week, because I don't have time to hold all this in and tell you 2 weeks from now. So I get that completely.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever tried therapy before?
No, I haven't, but I just, because I'm getting ready to go into senior year and I gotta go to grad school, and I just found out they make you go to therapy in graduate school. So that'll be my first time in a year. So we'll see how it goes. I thought about going to therapy, but I feel like one thing I tell people, especially like being a peer counselor and working with students on campus, go when you're ready, because some people, they will prematurely go to therapy, and it's like they're not ready to, like, it's like I have one person, they'll go to therapy, they'll talk, it's like, okay, I'm not ready for this, like they just stop going. So then like that makes you confused, because you already opened up some emotions that have been put out there, but you haven't like kept addressing this. So I'm not opposed to therapy. I just feel like we gonna see in grad school when they make me.
We
gonna see.
Yeah, we gonna see, exactly.
Yeah.
What piece of advice would y'all give to someone that's currently going through it? Because we're still in the pandemic, things are still on lockdown. So if y'all could offer a piece of advice to anybody going through it, what would y'all say?
I would say hold on and it gets better. I think one thing with this pandemic, for anybody that's religious, like I really learned how to practice my faith more and pray. Because, like I grew up going to church and everything, but I think, like they tell you how to pray and like you go through things in life, but it wasn't until like I got into adulthood and I started going through things, and it was like, I need to go back to the Bible. I need to start praying more. Like, I need to start doing what I was taught. Because, in adulthood, you go through things just like, this is what my parents was talking about. Like, it's just one of those things. So I think, it gets better. You may not see it right now, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that you really have to use this time, because like you said, we're on lockdown. Use this time to tap into yourself. If you're going through things, whether it's family-wise, school-wise, financially, just tap into yourself and see what the root of those problems are, and try your best to get through it, but also make progress. Because that's all you can do is, like, you got problems in life, you just try to get through it so you can get to the next step. So
right.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think my point would be, it's okay to not always have your good days, because, it's going to be an up and down, and everything is going to be, a lot more sensitive because we're in a pandemic. But it's okay. Don't be so hard on yourself, because you're doing the best that you can. Because that's something I have to tell myself often. Like, you're doing the best you can with what you have right now.
Yeah.
So be patient with yourself. Practice a lot of self-care. And I don't mean just like, like reading a book or like just having some quiet time. Like, do things that you actually like to do. Because once you start putting yourself first, you'll be able to like give to everybody else. Yeah. So that would be like one of my best advice.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I had one of my moments on Monday where I was just so overwhelmed with school and everything, and just like, it had piled up. So I had a speech I had to give yesterday. I gave my speech in like 10 minutes, and I was like, all right, I'm done with that. I got 2 more finals. I'm not really worried about that because it's open book. So once I get those done, I was just planning like everything that I wanted to do once this semester ends. In terms of stuff that I like to do that I've had to put, on the back burner just because of school and work. But self-care is definitely key. Like, I definitely do agree with that. And it's something that it's not as stressed a lot because in this country, we have to stay busy. People want us to stay busy. Like, that's just how it is. But it's like we have to have that downtime to take care of yourselves.
And that's why I feel like, and I agree with that, like, a lot of people have what they call, like, a hustle mentality, where it's like you can't take any breaks. It's frowned upon if you say, okay, I'm not working today, like, and it's okay, because sometimes, like, you get overwhelmed. We're human. Like, just like, I've been working, doing this for how many days, how many hours straight. I need to give myself a mental break so I can recharge. So I definitely feel like self-care needs to be normalized. It's not a bad thing to take a break. Like, you're human. Like, you have a battery like everybody else.
Yeah. And that's something that they teach you about in grad school, too. They'll tell you, like, do not study for 8 hours a day. Because 6 of those hours, you're just looking at a book. You're looking at whatever notes you have. You're not really retaining anything. So, like, just do it in moderation. And I think that's something, like, everybody can use. Because, like, you don't have to work 8 hours a day and then come home and work another 4. It's, like, do what's best for you. Because if you're, like, working but you're not being productive, you might as well went to sleep.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about reading the Bible and stuff too. Like, recently I just doing the Bible study every Tuesday morning, and that gives me like lots of encouragement. And plus I'm reading all these stories about these people in the Bible that my grandparents was telling me about, or my mom was telling me about. I never really got it, but it's like now that I read it, it's like now it's starting to like click. I don't think I fully like understand it where I can start spitting scriptures off like my head without like reading it, but like it definitely does help. It's turned my life around.
Yeah, same for me, because same with me. A friend of mine, he's also a counselor with me at Hampton. He started his own. It's called Leap Youth Ministries. He's from Maryland, actually, and it's kind of like an organization on campus where we meet Tuesday. Same with us, Tuesday nights at 7. And, you just, like, you pull different stories from the Bible. We just apply it to everyday life, or we, like, focus on a certain scripture. And for me, like, it really helped, because I think the Bible is the key to life. As, like, much as the old people stress that, like, everything you go through, there's a scripture for that. And I think one of my biggest scriptures that I've been really that's one of my favorites now, is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And it says, trust in the Lord with all thy heart and lean not on your own understanding. Like, in all your ways, acknowledge him and he will direct your path. And I really had to understand, like, during this pandemic, it's like, I didn't understand a lot. Like, I didn't understand why our college experience was taken away from us. I didn't understand why, I wasn't getting internships, why I was failing this. It's like, I did not have to, like, I just didn't understand. About to realize, lean on your own understanding. Because last year, I was just depressed. Like, my internships were taken. I wasn't finding anything. This summer, it's like everything I didn't have then, I have it now. Because God restored that for me. So I was like, sometimes it's just a matter of God said, it's not your time right now. You need to get yourself together because the blessing I'm going to give you, you need to be prepared for it.
Right.
And looking back, I wasn't prepared for, like I said earlier, I wasn't in the right mental space to be getting an internship and doing any of that. So, you know, I got into peer counseling. I got e-board positions. I'm doing internships now. So I think, you know, sometimes you may not understand why things are happening, but God says, just hold on. I'm coming. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I've gotten better at just letting God. You know, I always say, like, if it's in your will, it'll happen. If it's not in your will, then give me the peace of understanding to just keep going and doing what I got to do.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it'll eventually come to me, whatever I desire. But sometimes I just gotta wait, or sometimes he'll give it to me.
And I like how you said, like, in your will, because one thing I had to learn how to do was, like, when I pray, like, you know, it was praise that God give me this, that, and the third. And it's like sometimes you have to learn how to pray for what you need and not what you want.
Right.
Because some of the things I want, I don't need it. Because if it's in God's will, it's like, okay, you may want to do this, but I'm giving you what you need because you need to do this. So it's just one of those things, like, you just have, like, the Bible just tells you have to learn what you need to pray for and how to pray.
Yes.
Right.
So that was my experience.
I agree with both of y'all. And I had to learn that lesson too. And it's easier said than done.
It is.
Sometimes I'm like, you know, God, your will be done, but what's your will? Because you're not telling me today. And it's like, and I had to learn, like, God works things out in his own time. To your point, it was like he works things out when he knows you're ready. Because to Madison's point, it's like, you guys, like, I want this, God, I've been doing all this and I'm doing what I, like, need to do. I've been working hard, and God's like, I know, but keep going, because you can't get it right now. Because if you get it right now, you're not going to be able to appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
So.
Yeah. Talk to me about y'all's childhoods growing up here in Maryland. What was that like for y'all?
Ooh, okay. So
you want to go first? Or me?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
So, okay, yeah. So, I'm not originally from Calvert County. I was born and raised in Prince George's County. So, I was born into a middle-class family. Both of our parents were military. My mom retired when I was 4. My dad had, like, a regular government job. So, it was fun growing up in PG. I've always been in private schools. Can't complain too much. But life changed when we moved to Calvert. It was just like one of those things where in my childhood, you've been to PG before. It's a cultural difference, to say the least. You know, you grew up around mostly Black people. I've always saw, like, well-off Black people. I grew up around, people, doctors, lawyers, people who own their own businesses, things like that. And then even school-wise, most of my schools were Black. The church was Black. Sports, Girl Scouts, everything was mostly Black people. And moving to Calvert was like, oh my God, where y'all at? Like, it wasn't really like that anymore. Because my dad told me, because they told us when they decided that they wanted to build their own house and move to Calvert. Because, my parents are from the South, so they like living in the country, seeing the foxes and stuff. Like, I don't like that. Right. But, so they told us, like, it's mostly white out here, and you're going to have to learn a lot of things about white people that you didn't learn before. And I thought, like, they were really talking about racism and things of that nature. And as a kid, I didn't experience that. But my parents, they could write a book, because my parents grew up in the Deep South in the 60s and 70s. So they already knew what that life was like. But finishing my childhood in Calvert County, it had its perks. I will say it is kind of challenging when you're basically a teenager and you've never had to interact with other races before.
Right.
Because it's just like, I know you growing up here, you probably have seen racism, like, early on with white people, like how they are. But for me, it's like I had to experience that. And she had to experience that almost into her 20s, because she moved out here at 16. So it's just like growing up in Maryland, like, you just saw two different worlds. But my childhood couldn't complain, didn't go without. But I will say, like, moving out here was really like an eye-opener for me.
Same for me. I moved out here, actually, it was my 15th birthday, right before when I went into 10th grade here. And similarly, our experiences, I was like, whoa, okay. This is a lot. And I remember, my dad, he kind of sat us down. Like, both of my parents were very, very adamant about it. Like, I was looking back, I think I'm grateful for the experience. Because living up in PG, like, you see a lot of Black excellence. You see a lot of Black people doing well for themselves. And you see that out here, too, but it's just not as apparent as it was in PG. So I think coming out here and you see, like, okay, this is, because it's like, how can I sum this up? Like, my parents were like, this is how the world is.
Yeah.
Like, you see black people, but it's not as much as it is in PG. So they were like, you need to be out here because you need to know what it's like to be in other spaces. Yeah. So I think as much as it was a cultural transition, it was definitely needed. But I definitely am glad I lived in PG and I got that foundation, and I came here. And because I came here and I met tons of friends, you know, who all are mostly black, but you know, it was like, you know, it was still like a good experience for me out here. I can't complain. Like, and especially when moving out here, I decided to go to an HBCU. Yeah. I think coming from like such great like black excellence as a kid to coming out here to being the minority to go back to being the majority, I was like, you know, it all came together.
It's like, I didn't have a choice but to go to HBCU.
Yeah. I need it.
Yeah, exactly. I grew up here my entire life. Yeah. And when I was 17, I got my first job at PG working at the warehouse for the PG County School Board, and that was a huge cultural shock. Like, nobody had really sat me down and prepared me and said, listen, you're going into this new environment. It's going to be a lot of, you know, black people, a lot of people you haven't been around with your whole life, so just be ready for it. Like, my first day, I'm sitting there waiting. I'm seeing all these people that look like me coming in there. I'm like, oh my goodness. And it's like I've grown up around white people my whole life. Yeah. So it's like I didn't know how to act because like I didn't want to be like that one black kid that acts white, thinks they're better than everybody else. So it's just like, dang, like I don't know what to do. Yeah. So I think for like 2 or 3 weeks I ain't talked to anybody. I just did my job. I ain't really talked to anybody. Yeah. And my one friend James, bless his heart, like he always tried to talk to me because he's from DC. Yeah. And he would make that commute there. People. Yeah, and so he would always try and talk to me, and I'd be like, yeah, what's up? Just kind of keep him to the side. But I was using like discernment, trying to like see, okay, who should I talk to? Who should I not talk to? Because there's a lot of people doing some crazy stuff on our breaks, and I don't want to get myself involved in that. Yeah. But I had used my discernment, and then by the 3rd or 4th week, I just started opening up with a lot of people, and it was like, all right, I can mingle with like my kind.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because, and I hate to say this, but a lot of kids, like we grew up in PG. For some of us, we don't even know like this part of Maryland existed. Yeah.
Like, exactly.
They said Calvert County. I was like, where exactly is that? And it's like when we moved out here, it like same thing. I was like, well, they already stereotyped people from PG. Yeah. So coming at like that was a big thing. Always being stereotyped. So like I would meet black girls in the school. I'm like, hey girl. They were just like, oh my God, you're from PG. I'm like, yes. And then like I just didn't really find my place in because like with the white kids, like once they find out you're from PG, it was kind of like ugh. Yeah. Like they just snooze their nose down at you, but really it's like not everybody from PG is like how you see on ABC 7 News. Not everybody's a criminal, not everybody's illiterate. Like there are like very intelligent black people that come out of PG County, but I think same with you, like moving out here, that was my situation. I had to use my discernment because I was like, I don't know. I really don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I had those instances also where people ask me, hey, like, where you from? Because I'd be like, you know, I'm not from the PG area. So they ask me, where you from? I say, Calvert County. Calvert County? What's Calvert County?
That's what we said. We was like, what is that?
I was like, they would look at me like, Calvert County, like, where is that? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, it's like 45, 50 minutes away. You drive 45, 50 minutes just to come here?
In PG, everything is like
20 minutes.
You got all you can do, hop on the beltway, and you take that exit, you're right there. I never, like, when I saw Calvert, the first thing that stood out to me was like, y'all have no sidewalks.
Yeah. Exactly.
No sidewalks, no metro. I was like, oh.
Right.
In this country out here, so that was a big adjustment because I never... Like, I seen, like, for example, one of our neighbors, they have goats and stuff. Like, I seen goats, like, at, like, a farm or something. But actually, like, I was like, I need to take us back to the city.
Yeah. Like, yeah, and, like, sometimes it would suck, too, because, like, we would get off work, and everybody would ask me, like, yo, Ced, you trying to hang after work? I'd be like, I can't. I got to go home.
Yeah, you got to drive.
Yeah, my commute's, like, 45, 50 minutes away. I got to get home. If I don't get home by, like, 5 or 6, like, that's on me. Yeah. You know? So.
Yeah, definitely.
Where do you guys' religious roots come from? Like, when did you guys start going into the church?
Well, our parents were both born in Tennessee. Our grandfather on our dad's side, he was a pastor. Yeah. So I think that's where our roots in religion come from. And we grew up in the church. Like grew up like just about every Sunday, like going to church. So we had that foundation.
Yeah.
But I think
we went to private school too.
Yeah, private Christian schools. I almost forgot about that. we both went to private Christian schools just about until we moved out here. Yeah. So I think we always had like a very Bible based foundation. But I think as we got older, we kind of grew in that, because it's different when you grow up with it and you're like, oh, okay, well, so I'm supposed to.
You were supposed to go to church. You were supposed to do this,
but like when you're in it and when you start experiencing life, it's like, okay, this is what the old folks was talking about. Let me see how I can apply it to my life.
Exactly. Yeah. Because when I was in PG working that job, that's when I really relied on God to get me through it. Because like this was such a huge cultural shock, and I didn't even know if I wanted to, keep doing it or just make it. But I would just pray every morning before I walked in there, and I'd listen to these different sermons, listen to worship music on the way to different jobs and stuff, and it provided me that encouragement to just keep going, but also rely on God with this one situation that I didn't understand. Like I didn't understand why I was in that position where I could have been working a job like right here, being content, but God just wanted me to expand my surroundings and just learn different things. So,
and sometimes and I had to really, what I will say, like I grew up in the church, but when I got to like high school, I kind of didn't really, like I would go to church, but I would never really apply the things that I was learning. But it wasn't until I got to Hampton, like I said, I was put in different situations that I really started to rely back on my faith. But I think looking back on, I think God putting me in Calvert County was for like a purpose, because I will say growing up in PG, it is a privilege as a Black child, because I think PG is the richest Black county in the United States. Nowhere else in America will you go to a county or even a state and find that. So I think it is a privilege, but also it is a blessing and a curse at the same time, because it's dangerous when you only grow up around Black people and you don't know anything about how white people, how they are, how they operate, what they think about you. So I think, how to understand, look about like, God really put me out here so I can learn about myself. I need to know how to carry myself, not to be another stereotype, not to be another statistic. Not to say I want to learn that in PG, but sometimes you had to experience certain things, because some of the situations I was put in here with Calvert, like with some of the people I met, I was like, like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I really think, God just do things for a purpose. So I really think like, now that I'm older and I can look back and like, God put me out here. I may not have liked being here, but I really think it came with a purpose and a lesson that I always will take with me. So.
Yeah. And I think just in faith, not only moving out here, but like, I think my story is like, just as far as like me going to college, me going to like finding work after college, going to grad school, that's a testament in and of itself. Yeah. Because it's hard. So like, like going to high school, going to college, transitioning from college to work, then going back to school. And I really had to rely on God for a lot of things, especially when I was like, okay, God, it should be going like this. And he's like, okay, it will. But like, do it my way. You'll appreciate it,
Yeah, exactly. How was the adjustment going from private school to public school, and which do you guys prefer more? Because I know with private schools, a lot is more structured versus public schools where it's almost like open season a little bit. So which do y'all prefer?
Well, to answer the first question, the adjustment part. So for me, it was a big adjustment, because in private school, you wear your uniform, you you have your classes, and then, once a week or twice a week, you got to go to chapel, and, your curriculum, you learn about the Bible and things like that. So I always had like a set schedule and structure. But then when I moved out here, I didn't have that. Like, for example, I remember I told my mom, like, Mom, I gotta buy all these clothes. She's like, for what? Because I'm in public school now. Like, we don't wear uniforms. So that was another thing. Like, I never experienced waking up trying to find something to wear, because you had 3 options. You wore a skirt, pants, or sweatpants to private school, like when you had gym and things like that. And then even how things operate. Like, I think in middle school, I think we had like, 8 days and B days. And things. It took me a while, because like, I never had that. So I think for me, just moving out here and not having that structure took a lot to get used to. But as far as what I prefer, I would say public school. And here's why. I liked private school. I think it's good for little kids, but I do think in a way they shelter you from a lot, because simply for the fact that there's nothing wrong with like going to a Bible-based school. But I do think that there's some things that they just don't teach you. They don't stress to you. And it wasn't until I got to public school and it was like, I've been sheltered from this for 13 years now, and I don't really, like, for example, sex ed. I don't think did you learn that?
Yeah.
You learned that?
Yeah, but the problem is they took it away right when you were supposed to learn it. They didn't
They took it, like in our school, they took that away. So it was like, looking back, I'm like, that's kind of crazy because, you about to leave school and go out to the world, you need to know that stuff. But I just think, sex and things of that nature, like drugs, talking about that, or in some schools, it was just really sheltered. And you don't really know about it, and that's not a good thing because even though you go to, like, a private school, you still got to live in the world outside of private school. So I just think I prefer public, but I think for little kids, like when I have children, I think private school starting off, but eventually, definitely before middle school, they will be in public school.
Yeah, I agree. I think my transition was a little harder because, like I said, I was 15 like when I moved out here, so I was about to go.
Right, exactly.
So for me, it was like, I feel like our experiences were a little different because right when I had a lot of the things that she didn't get to experience at private school, because that was when I think the leadership and administration was in transition.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of things that I was able to get, like I got sex education and all those good things from a biblical standpoint, but I liked it because the pastor was very realistic about certain things, So I didn't really mind that. I agree with the fact that I think private school is a really good foundation, but I think transitioning from from private to public school, it was very different because you are a little sheltered in a way because it's like, oh my gosh, like, we're talking about God and God is like the focal point of everything. And that's not, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not how the world is all the time. Especially when you get up to being like 10th and 11th grade, it's like, there's like, okay, honey, that's good for when you go home. But in public school, like, you are here to learn and you have to do all these things, So I think as far as preference, I would definitely say public school with a private school foundation, just because I felt like it really did prepare me to go to public school. But I think after 6th grade, we can cut it off.
Yeah, exactly.
You've learned enough to be like, okay.
Yeah, I'm glad y'all brought up that point with like being like sheltered and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad that I went through public school and high school just to see the people who I went to school with just kind of go off the deep end in a way. Because it's like, 1 year they're like a saint almost. They're not doing nothing.
Right.
Next year they're drinking, smoking, having sex, doing drugs and stuff.
It's weird because, like, I will say we're sheltered. Like, we went to all black private schools. So it's one of those things where, like, they shelter you from it in school. But when they left school, I mean, that's where you learned everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, either at home or around your friends. Like, that's where we learned a lot. But it's just, like, when I got to public school, it's just, like, even the dynamic was different. Like, certain things that would happen or be, like, talked about in school. Like, when I came out here, that was the first time I ever saw teenage pregnancy. Like, in my family, I've seen it, but in private school, I didn't see it. Because in my schools, if you got pregnant, you got kicked out. You couldn't come to school. And then, like, I know kids who get in trouble and things like that, like, got arrested or things like that. But even just, like, just seeing that shocked me because I never experienced that.
It was
like,
almost taboo being in a private school because it was like, oh, okay, well, oh, where'd she go? Oh, girl, she just had to leave. When it's like, oh, no, she got pregnant or something else happened. And I feel like in public school, it's like,
girl,
it is what it is. Yeah. She's coming to class.
Yeah.
She's... Well, it's not wasn't a big deal here, but I think that's needed because it's like people come from all walks of life. People go through things and things happen, and it can't be in a place where it's like, oh, we're gonna just like brush it off to the side, or it didn't happen. No, like work with what the issues or whatever. Not even the issue. Work whatever the dynamic is. Because you're still children. Like, we're kids at 15 and 16.
Like, we figured it out. It's like, oh, she just left. Like, oh, we saw the other day she's pregnant. Y'all could. We know, but it's just like that's just one thing that they just moving to Calvert. There's a lot of things I saw in the school that I didn't necessarily see in private school.
Yeah, I was listening to like a sermon last week by a pastor, and he was talking about like those like taboo subjects that's not talked about, and he was talking about how when he went to church as a kid, the pastor was like, all right, don't have sex, don't drink, don't do any of that because it's bad for you. And it was like, that's it. And so he was just like, why shouldn't I be doing this stuff when everybody else in the world is doing it? And it's like when you don't explain those reasons why you shouldn't do it and you just leave it up to like the church or in the world and no one's explaining it, it just becomes so confusing. And then you start to stray and then you become of the world.
I like that you mentioned that because ironically, I had that conversation. We had that talk a lot because his dad's a pastor. I think my grandfather became a pastor when my dad was a teenager.
In his 20s. Late teens.
He was like late teens, almost into his 20s. Yeah. And then his sister and his brother heavy in the church. I think one's a deacon, the other one, she's I want to say a minister or a missionary, one of the two. But I tell him all the time, like, in church, they always stress to you, don't have sex, don't do this, don't do that. And it's like, I just think like, as a child, like you hear that your whole life, but then you have to remember like a child has a mind that wanders.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I always hear like, if you have sex, you're going to hell. I'm like, wait a minute. But it's just like, and I see it in church all the time, and that's when people always like, they ask you about like, you know, how you a Christian but you believe this. And it's like, you know, in my church I've seen where, you know, they stress about sex, but then it's like you always see people coming in here who have children out of wedlock. Mm-hmm. Now I don't think that's a bad thing, but I feel like, yes, the Bible says it, but also you have to remember we're human like everybody else. Everybody makes mistakes. So it's just like, and even in private school we were talking about earlier, I had a teacher who scared us so bad with that. I mean, she would tell you, if you don't go out here and witness to people about God, you're going to hell. If God came back today, you're going to hell. And mind you, we're like in 4th grade. So I'm like, oh my God, like I was praying like, God, don't come back today. I'm not saved yet. I don't want to go to hell. But it's just like, we have to remember that people were human. God knows you're going to make mistakes and things like that. But I just feel like in the church sometimes it's like, sometimes y'all preach these things, but y'all don't put the word behind it.
Right.
Because, yeah, like the Bible says, no children before marriage. He didn't say you going to hell if you do that. It's like, you know, repent, pray. And the Bible also, that's one thing about the Bible. You know better, you do better. Mm-hmm. So I just feel like sometimes in the church, they preach those things, but you also have to put the but behind, like, don't have sex, but, you know, God's not going to take you out the Lamb's Book of Life if you do it.
Right.
Things like that.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think church and just people in general, I think you have to be a little more realistic with how things are, because life happens, you know, and God says certain things in his word, but at the same time, God has grace. God is forgiving. And talk to God like, all right, God, I messed up on this. God's not going to be like, okay, yeah, you messed up and you going to hell. I'll see you there. It's like, he's not like that. You know? And I think sometimes that's man's perception of God. Like, God didn't die so that way we can go to hell. He died so that way we are able to be forgiven.
Right.
And to get back into a relationship with him. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I'm noticing and learning as I get older. It's not about how many mistakes you make. It's about the relationship that you build with God. Yeah. Because God is like everybody else in a sense. He wants to get to know you and he wants to love you. Because you wouldn't be in a relationship, whether it be romantic or platonic, with someone who didn't talk to you or someone who didn't appreciate you and you did all this stuff for them. It's like, oh, I only talk to you when I see you. Like, if you got a friend like that, you cut them off. Mm-hmm. God's the same way. He's like, no, just come and talk to me. You messed up, okay. I forgive you. Now let's figure out how we can. That don't mean you don't have consequences, but every mistake you make or every journey that you take is supposed to.
He's a merciful God. He don't. Amen. You know, it's not you make a mistake. You made a mistake. Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like that.
Yeah, and it's like you look at other people in the Bible. Like Paul was a murderer. Yeah. Paul was out here murdering Christians. David was an adulterer. You know, David did all these different things, but he was still after God's heart, and he repented and he was, you know, saved, even though he made these terrible mistakes. So it's like even you look at the figures in the Bible. Even they struggled when they were on
and
earth.
That's what I tell people. Like y'all, like in church, you really have to. Like people in the Bible went through some of the same things that you see today, and God. Not one time the Bible said, oh, Paul, you murdered somebody. I hate to tell you this, but you can't come into heaven. You can't do it. He didn't say that to him. It's just, I feel like sometimes people get so caught up with, you have to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And God didn't make us perfect. We didn't die on the cross. He did. Mm-hmm. So it's like, nobody's perfect. God knew before we made the mistake that we were going to make that mistake. But I feel that, you know, your relationship with him, you know, you have to pray, ask God for forgiveness and things of that nature.
Yeah, exactly. All right, shifting gears from the religious talk. Okay. What led y'all to choose Hampton as your school choice instead of choosing an HBCU in Maryland?
Okay, wait, no. I need to go first on this because this one's a little close to my heart.
All right.
This one, like this was an argument in the house.
Okay, so our experiences were completely different. My experiences in applying to colleges was this. I applied to 25 colleges and universities across the country. Just all because my dad was like, apply everywhere.
Application fees.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Them joints are expensive.
Yes.
A lot of them went through Common App, so it wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
It's like if it was like 25,
it's like 50 now. I see.
Yeah, but like if I applied to 25, a good 15 of them were on like Common App, so it wasn't like terrible. I was just sending in applications. So it got to a point where it was, I want to say May, and I wouldn't accept it anywhere. And you know, you hear everybody's like, oh, it's college decision day. You hear it, and I'm like, okay, God, I want to go here. Because my first choice was UNC Chapel Hill. Like, I visited the school. I drug my parents down there, and I loved the campus. But I didn't get in. So I was like, okay. And I literally applied everywhere. And I remember I got into UMES. I think it was like, had to be May. And my dad was like, well, they don't have a good biology program, Taylor, so there's no point in you going down there. And I was furious. I was like, are you serious? I've been applying, and I've been applying since like October at this point. You mean to tell me the one school I got into I can't go? He's like, no, because it's not going to be good for you. And then he was like, well, have you prayed about it? And I was like, no, because I applied. So my dad was like, just pray on it and see where it is. And for me, it got to a point where it was like, okay, God, like, you know what? Wherever you want me to go, I'll go. Like, if you want me to go to CSM, if you want me to go to UMES, like, just tell me and I'll go. Because I was like, at this point, it was getting taxing, And that was on a Friday. And I'll never forget, that Wednesday, I was in the middle of AP government. And something told me to just, like, check my phone. And I got an acceptance letter from Hampton University. And it was like, congratulations, Taylor. Welcome to your home by the sea. And, we're from D.C., We're from this, whatever. You get the point. But the point is, Howard is our school up here. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get into Howard. Because, like, that's the two I was still waiting on. And I was like, okay, well, what if you get into Howard? Because I was like, that wouldn't be a bad school either. But I remember I went down to Hampton because my parents had to go to Richmond. So I was like, let's just stop by Hampton just to see. And there was nobody on campus. I remember just like kind of riding around, and it really felt like home. So I was like, I really think this will be like the place for me. And since then, I have not regretted my decision. Like, I love my experience at Hampton.
Nice.
Me? No. Completely different. So I was in a situation where when I was a kid, I knew I was good at a lot of different things. So, you always hear kids say, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. I want to be this and that. That wasn't me. Like, I really just was good at a lot of different things. So when we got to high school, and it was senior year, everybody was applying to colleges. And I'm like, I know I want to go to college. I don't know where, and I don't know what for. I just know I want to get out of Maryland, specifically Calvert County. So I went to my guidance counselor, and she was looking at my grades, and she was like, you have the grades to go to college, but you just, what's going on? I was like, well, I don't know what I want to go to school for. And she was like, okay, well, we'll just spit out some careers. So she said, you could be a case manager. No. A social worker. No. An engineer. No. She was like, well, Madison, what? I was like, you can spit out careers all day. I don't know. So when it came down to applying for colleges, I applied to 3. I applied to Howard University, Hampton, and a school called Old Dominion. Mm-hmm. I applied there. So I knew I could get into all 3. So I think I applied to Hampton, but I did not want to go there. Simply because Taylor was there, Shaylin was there. I had a couple other friends there. It's like, I know all of y'all. So I kind of wanted to just spread my wings and do my own thing. So initially I was looking at schools like FAMU, Clark, Atlanta, and things like that. So my dad was like, those are good schools, but, we don't want to pay for you to go 18 hours away from home. You don't even know what you want to do for your career. Mm-hmm. So he was like, you can go to CSM for a year or 2. And I was like, no, I don't want to stay in Maryland. So I prayed about it. So it got to, I did early applications. And at this point, it was like, I really didn't know where I was going to go. So I was just torn between either going to CSM or not going to college at all. So I looked in the mailbox, and mind you, I had good grades, but I will say my SAT scores was not the prettiest. So that was one thing that was really deterring my situation. So I looked in the mailbox, and I got an acceptance letter from Hampton University, and I was like, well, I guess that's where I'm going. And so I got there. I really didn't expect to stay at Hampton for long, but looking back on it, it was probably the best decision I ever made. Like, I really just don't see myself anywhere else from Hampton. Even though it's my senior years, like, I'll probably be the only one crying leaving Hampton because I just enjoy myself so much there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. It's weird how, like, God gives you these signs and stuff, and you realize it's not what you may have wanted or what you were looking for, but it's like, once he gives it to you, it's like the best decision ever. Yeah. Like, with me, I started off at CSM just because I wasn't really mature enough or ready enough to go to college. Not in the sense that I was going to go crazy and whatnot, start doing some reckless stuff, but I wasn't really ready to be around people as someone who's always had their own space and that's always just been to themselves. I wasn't really ready for all that. So I started off at CSM, and then I didn't even know Bowie was an HBCU.
Really?
Like, I didn't even know what an HBCU was, at least until Shayla got to Hampton and Miss Teresa was talking to me about HBCUs and how she thought that could really benefit me being around people of like, people that look like me. And so after I did that job in PG County and once the summer was over with, I was like, you know what? I think I could actually fit into an HBCU, being myself and being with people like me because they get me and they relate me, unlike, you know, my white friends. And like, I got white friends and stuff and they're there for me.
It's not the same.
They don't really understand the struggles that a black man goes through. So Bowie was always the plan, but it was just CSM, get my associates, then go to Bowie.
And that's one thing I will say. And I was in the same boat. I know, as a black person, this sounds awful to say, but I knew what HBCUs were, but I can only name to you 3. I only knew of the major ones like Spelman, Howard, A&T, Morehouse. Like, those are the only ones I knew of. I didn't know there was like 100 and something different HBCUs. So I think moving out here, I told my parents, like, there's nothing wrong with the PWI, but after my experience, I gotta go around an HBCU. And I always hear people say, like, when I was telling, like, my white friends in high school, like, I want to go to a historically black college. Even though I didn't know where I wanted to go to school, I knew I wanted to go to HBCU. And they were like, well, isn't it easier going to HBCU? I'm like, if anything, they make it harder for you because it's like, you're coming from an HBCU. They already stereotype you. They already think you're not as smart. They already think you're underqualified. So we're going to make sure when you leave here, you have the tools that you need to go out there. They're not just going to send you out there with a degree that, like, you don't know what to do with it. Like, Hampton, I really like that Hampton stresses that because like, at our school, like, you have, when you go to, like, certain events and stuff, you have to come business professional, business casual. A lot of people don't know that. How to dress between the two. They make you give an intro to introduce yourself. Like, I hated doing it freshman year because it got repetitive, but you supposed to go in places and how to introduce yourself, how to carry yourself. So I think HBCUs, especially for black people, and I really think kids in Calvert, like, I really stress them, go to an HBCU. Because I get, like, I've been around, like, white kids your whole life. There's nothing wrong with that, but go be in tune with your people because you will meet some lifelong connections that will carry you. And it just makes you proud to be who you are at an HBCU. And I think they really stress that.
And there's nothing like going to HBCU. Like, the
family.
pride you get. It's like, honey, it's like, I loved him. Like, honey, I went to Hampton, okay? And there's nothing, and it's like, it's nothing like it because, you know, you're sitting next to, like, future doctors, future lawyers, like, just people that, you know, inspire you. And it's different when you see someone that you know or, like, went to your school and they're doing great things. It's like, wow, like, she was me a few years ago, you know? And there's such a warmth. And I think you feel that warmth, especially, like, at homecomings and things like that. And I have to explain to people, like, homecoming, it feels like a family reunion, but you get to network with different people.
You go to church on Sunday.
Yeah, it feels like a family reunion. And, like, they always say, like, you come, like, they call Hampton, like, our home by the sea. But when you go after you haven't been for a while, it feels like home because it feels like you meet people and you see people that you haven't seen since your freshman year, or you get to, like, go to different events and just feel like you're at home again, you know? So I'd say all black people, like, you know, you have the rest of your life to be a minority. Go to HBCU.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, I love grad season. We're in grad season right now at HBCU, and it's just amazing how you see, like, for example, doctors and lawyers, like, you see all these people, like, what are your plans after grad school? Girl, I'm going to medical school. I'm going to law school. I'm going to be an engineer. It's just, like, you would think, people just think that if you go to HBCU, you just do nothing. Like, we don't, like, we produce greatness. Like, we are great. And it's just, like, you know, I want to be a psychologist. Only 4% of psychologists are black. So I take pride. Like, I go to an HBCU. I'm taught by black professors who work in the mental health field to come back to my own community and help people out. So I just really, like, stress go to an HBCU. It changed my life for the better.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get back on campus for Bowie, whether that's in the fall semester or the spring semester, just to be able to get that, like, experience. Because even though it's been virtual and it's been online, I've felt, like, a lot of pride being able to go to a HBCU, and just the fact that I'm studying to be a teacher and there's only 2% of black men that are teachers, like, I'm going to be, like, one of those people that are in the field, and it's like,
we need that.
We need that.
Black teachers.
Black male teachers especially, because you don't even hear that. I don't think I've ever had a black male teacher before. So I think that's a good role model.
And it's important because I've had black female teachers and black male teachers. And it was so important because you were like, it's different when you have someone who looks like you, who teaches with you, and it's like, no, you can do it. And you believe it because it's like, oh, well, you look like me. You know, it's like, it gives you that pride. It's like, no, I know you can do it. Like, let's work on it, you know, to see how we can get you to where you need to be.
Right,
you know?
exactly.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, as college students, you know, during your time at Hampton, and then you're still going through it right now, what were some of the challenges that you went through as students that you have overcame?
Oh, okay. So, coming into college, a lot of people don't know this, but I almost got kicked out of school for my grades. And it was one of those things where, like I said earlier, I didn't know what I wanted to do going into college. So I went in as a biology pre-med major because Taylor, I was like, I want to be a doctor. It's like, okay, well, I like kids. I want to be a pediatrician. But if you in college, like, it's a lot different when you grow up saying you want to do something and then when you're actually in the field during the coursework. Because I see a lot of people say, when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be this. When I got to college and I started doing the coursework, it wasn't for me.
Yep.
So I think one of my biggest challenges was really finding myself and see what I wanted to do. Because when I got that letter that said you have until spring 2019 to get your grades up or you'll be academically dismissed from Hampton, that's when I was like, you got two options. Either you find what you want to do, find what you're passionate about, and you finish college, or you go back home. I knew I didn't want to go back home. So I had to, and that's one thing about college, you're going to find yourself. And I really think that I had to sit down and say, okay, don't do what your sister wants you to do. Even though Taylor was telling me, girl, just switch your major because you know you don't want to do pre-med. But, you know, not doing what Taylor wants me to do, not doing what my parents think I should do. Because my parents, you know, they have their own careers. They made a life for themselves. You know, not doing what everybody else. What does Madison want to do? And I came home for that winter break and I found out, like, you know, I really like psychology. I love mental health. So I switched my major to that. And so that was my first challenge. My second challenge was really finding my voice. Because I remember, like, coming to college, I was like a shy, timid 17-year-old, you know. And especially like relationships and friendships. You know, I would look back like, I let somebody say that to me. And I ain't say nothing about it. And it's just like not being boastful, but you know, like finding yourself enough to know, like, hey, you're not going to say this to me. You're not going to treat me like this. And I think going to HBCU, especially like being around Taylor and her friends, I found that voice. Because Taylor was like, don't you let nobody talk to you like that. You stand up for yourself.
Right.
And I just think, like, maybe it's just me. Like, coming to HBCU, you have people around you who will help you find that voice. Because I had a couple of us say, she said, don't you let nobody treat you like that. And I didn't, like, you know, that just really helped me find myself and just really find a voice that I didn't know I had. And I appreciate it because, like, going through life, it's like, you're not going to treat me any type of way. You're not going to talk to me any type of way. I give you respect. You give it back to me. Yeah. So I think those were one of my two biggest challenges, finding myself and really tapping into what makes me happy.
And I think going to college, you're put in very adult situations at like 18 and 19 years old. And the world isn't so forgiving, especially when you're dealing with other people. It's like it puts you in a position where like you have to make a decision. And whatever decision you make, you have to live with it. So I think for me, it was more so I went to college and I knew what I wanted to do. But I think one thing I learned to do was fight for what I wanted, you know, because they always was like, oh, like, you know, you're pre-med, it's not going to come easy. And I'm like, girl, whatever. It's a big cakewalk. I got to chemistry. I got to organic chemistry. I got to everything else. And I was like, whew, okay. And sometimes I had to learn, like, it's not going to always happen the way you think it should happen. And that's a lesson I'm still learning today. Right. But it definitely teaches you to fight for what it is you want. You want this so bad? Okay, let's see. You know, because you can't, you know, like give up the first time it gets hard or the first time, okay, I didn't get this grade. Okay, maybe I should stop. No. Or like you even have people, it's like, well, Taylor, if it's too hard, maybe you should just do it like this. It's like, no. This is what I want to do. Come hell or high water, I'll fight for what I need to get. Right. Okay. Yeah. And I learned to block people out a lot of the time. Not to say you can't, you know, welcome advice, but sometimes I've learned when you have an idea of what you want to do, sometimes it's like, okay, you don't see the vision, and that's okay. You got to stay over there. So I think learning to trust myself enough to be like, okay, you know how to make the best decision for you. Finding yourself enough to know it's like you can be multifaceted, meaning like you can be in college, you still go get grades, but go figure out what Taylor likes to do. Like I had to figure out I like sitting in nature parks all day, and I'd be completely happy. But that's something I had to learn. Right. You know, you had it, and it's a beautiful process, like learning about what you want to do in your career and blossoming as like young women and young men. You know, and I think the two biggest lessons Hampton taught me was like fight for what you want. don't give up, and just find who you are and be okay with that journey.
Yeah.
You know?
I can relate to like all of those things,
Yeah.
especially with like, you know, finding my voice and like trying to find myself. Cause like when I started off college, I wanted to do computer science, but that's only because everybody in the family was telling me, you know what, you need to go do computer science. You should do IT. You're going to make 6 figures. You're going to make all this money. Like you should do it. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'll do that. You know, if they can teach me how to do it, then I'll do it. And I remember sitting in my advising office in the summer and she's giving me all the math classes, all the science classes that I'm going to have to take. And it's like, I'm not good at math.
Like,
I'm okay at science. And I was like, I'm not going to do this because I'm not going to risk my mental health, stressing myself out because everybody wants me to make 6 figures. So I was like, all right, I'm going to just do communications. And I got an internship locally here. I did that, was doing newspaper journalism. And I was like, I don't think this is for me. Like, I'm glad for the experience, but I don't think I can do this as a career. So I went through like about a year just not knowing what I wanted to do, but still kind of just doing my thing. And then, you know, teaching came up because I got a job at a daycare. And I was like, wow, this is like really natural to me. Like, I don't have to think when I'm in these situations where I have to think really fast. And so I was talking with one of my grandfathers about it. And he was like, you know, if it's like that and it's natural and you're having fun and you're making money and you're collecting your coins, then that's your job. So I was like, okay, you know, I prayed to God about it. And I took an education class. And I was like, this is it. Like, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to make that transition, be a guidance counselor, and help other students like me who need that direction also.
And that's something I had to tell her, too. I told Madison, like, because, like she said, she came in as pre-med. And I said, Madison, this is hard. From someone who was in, like their senior
she
year.
And her friends had a bet. They had $5 saying, who y'all think is going to...
It was a little more than that. But.
Do y'all think Madison's going to... Is she going to make it? I told you, I might as well just give y'all the money because I'm not going to last.
Because I told her, like, it's okay if that's not what it is you want to do. Because she was scared. Because she would tell me, like, you know, Taylor, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm like, bet on yourself. Because, like, you can listen to everybody else. Well, you should do this. If you love it, you'll make money doing it. If you love it, it'll come so natural. You'll wake up every day and you love going to work. And I told her it got to a point, like, I want to be a doctor, right? And doctors, you know, obviously make a lot of money. You could pay me $20,000. Obviously, I wouldn't like it. But I would still want to go be a doctor because that's where my passion is. It's like, you have to find a job. It don't matter how much money you make. That's what you like to do.
And it took me a while because, like I said, after first semester, I switched my major to psychology. So I was more happy with that because freshman year, like I was saying, like my grades were it just really showed that I wasn't going to flourish in that. Not because I didn't try. It was just like, I just don't have a passion for it. So when I switched to psychology, I got an internship. And that's what I always tell people. If you're in college, you don't do anything else, get an internship. Because that will really decipher if you like what you're doing or if you just... like if you need to change your major, do whatever. So I got an internship, and it was right out of freshman year. And I was like, I like, you know, working with kids, but at the time I thought I wanted to be an occupational therapist. And I was like, I don't think that that's for me because I was burnt out by the time I got home every day from my internship. So I'm like, if I feel this way now as an intern, imagine how I'm going to feel 10, 15 years down the road when I'm actually working in the field.
Right.
So then I also worked under a child psychologist, and I really was more intrigued with what she was doing. So when I came back to school for sophomore year, you know, I was talking to my advisors and I was talking to some of my professors, and they were psychologists. And he told me, he was like, so it sounds to me that you know what you want to do, you're just scared. And I said, I am frightened. He was like, why? And I was like, because it's like, you know, I told him he knows Taylor, my older sister. And he was all like, you know, is your sister doing something that you want to do as you were pre-med? That's like, she wants to be a doctor. You know, everybody always asks me, why don't you be a doctor like your sister? And he told me, it's like, that's why God made you and your sister as different people. Because what Taylor might like, you might not like it. And that's okay. You can't listen to what auntie, uncles, everybody else has to say, because at the end of the day, you have to get up every day and go to that job. Because granddaddy retired. He's been retired for 20 years. He did his job. You have to go to work and make the best out of it because now you're affecting other people, especially as a psychologist, because you're there to service other people, help with their mental health. And if you're miserable, you can't do your job.
Right.
So I think I really had to learn that, you know, yes, Taylor's been a wonderful role model for me, but I can't always do what she does because now we're grown and we're two totally different people. So I think having to get over that fear of not doing what Taylor's doing and not disappointing my family was hard. Because it wasn't just till last semester that I told my parents, I sat them down, I was like, I don't want to be an occupational therapist anymore. And they were like, what? Like, why? I was just like, I told them, like, I wasn't happy with my internship. And I never had told them that, even though I got that internship freshman year. But I just think sometimes, especially in college, you just go after professions because that's what your family tells you to do. Or that's what your parents want you to do. And you just have to tell them, like, I mean, I understand what y'all want me to do, but I have my own life to live. So I had to get over a lot of fears to be happy with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I have to tell her a lot. They'll get over it.
Yeah. And
They'll get over it.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it also goes back to finding your voice also and sticking up for what you want to do. Because y'all probably remember, I was so shy and timid when I was younger. I was so shy. I ain't want to talk to nobody. I ain't want nothing to do with anybody. And it's like, whatever people wanted me to do, I just kind of, went along with it. Even though internally, I knew that that's not what I wanted to do. And that's a very passive and dangerous mindset to have. Because when you're very passive with like that stuff, all that anger, animosity just builds up. And eventually you're going to kirk and spaz on somebody. And it's like, why didn't you say that you didn't want to do it? And it's now you're stuck doing it. So it's like now I'll be 21 in July. It's like, I've been glad to say that this past year and a half, I've been sticking up for what I want to do and that people respect that. And if they can't respect that, then it's like, all right, I'm going to just put you in your little box right there. We can talk and whatnot. But in terms of my future, we're not going to talk. Because when I wanted to be a teacher, a lot of people looked at me like, teacher, you want to be a teacher? Like, why do you want to be a teacher? And it's like, I feel deep down that this is something that I want to do and I'm going to go for it. And some people didn't understand that, but for the ones that understood it and got it, that gave me that fire to just keep going. So I think that is true, finding your voice and just sticking up for what you believe in.
And I will say, I am very proud of you because I listened to your podcast. Like, when I was, like, going up and down the road to, like, South Carolina.
Yeah, she called me. She's like, I'm listening to CedTalks Podcast.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's so good. And I was telling Shayla while I was down there, I was like, he opens up.
Yes, I was like, Ceddy got a podcast.
Because I put it on for her, and she was like, who is this? And I was like, it's Ceddy. She was like, no, it's not. I'm like, yes, it is. And I was like, so I didn't want to come on here and say that I am so proud of you. Like, I love listening to your podcast. It's like, it's a really good
and it's
thing.
like I had to learn, don't let nobody speak fear into your vision because you might not understand it. Like one thing I always got when I told people I want to be a psychologist, and I think with our generation, especially with the pandemic, we see a lot of mental health and how it affects people, especially since we've been at home. Like depression skyrocketing, anxiety, suicides were at a high at one point. And I think it was easier for me talking to people like in our age group saying, I want to be a psychologist. I'm like, people are like, yeah, that's wonderful. Older people was like, why do you want to sit and talk to crazy people all day? And it's like, it's just like,
it's a disconnect.
And I'm just like, I noticed that with our generation, with the older generation, I feel like with them it's a lot of stigma behind it. But I think with us, we understand it more because we went to school with kids like in high school who had depression. I even saw some kids in school that had drug problems. And so you understand because we see those things. But I just had to realize, I can't let y'all stigma and y'all not understanding what I want to do affect me. Because at the end of the day, like, my purpose is to help somebody like you who didn't have that resource because of stigma. So I have to learn, like, they may not understand my plan and what I want to do, but this is for me. I got to go out there and do it for myself.
Right. And that's like a whole other conversation that we could have on the stigma of like mental health in the older generation.
Because I did a whole presentation. Like, my professor said, I give you extra points because you opened up some worms, honey. I was like, come on. Right.
That saying, what goes in the house stays in the house. That just, you're not opening up and you just keeping that hurt in. And if it's really bothering you, then it's going to come out eventually. Because some people, they don't care. They'll just keep it to themselves. Not a care in the world, but like if it affects others and they're keeping it to themselves, then it's going to hurt them. You ended up graduating from Hampton. How did that feel after all your hard work culminated and you got to that point?
That was an interesting time because around that time my grandfather was really sick. So, and it just happened that he couldn't make it to my graduation. So it was a weird time. Like, I was super excited. I was proud. Like, I had gotten an internship at the NIH, which was one of my goals. But it was just like, I felt like at a time I was supposed to be my happiest was a time I was at my lowest too. So I felt like it was a mix of both. I was so proud because, I had made my friends, and I graduated. Like, I'll never forget graduation day. It was the only day that had rain
I remember that day.
Like, oh chaotic. My God.
It was chaotic.
I apologize on behalf of Hampton because that was terrible. Like, it shouldn't have been like that.
Because we had all left the stadium and they said, no, go back in.
You literally saw people like running back to go in.
Because what y'all didn't know is they had told us you can only invite a certain amount of people. Mm-hmm. The morning of, we had tickets. You couldn't have told us that a week ago. Yeah. Now my grandma can't come in. It was just a hot mess. Mm-hmm. But that day I was so excited. I went home and I immediately started like working at the NIH. And I was happy because I was like, I was at NIH, but a part of me was still like lacking. Because what people don't talk about is post-grad depression. Mm-hmm. Because it's a transition. Like you go from seeing some of your best friends every day to now it's like, well, you're in North Carolina, you're in Oklahoma, you're separated. You don't have that support group anymore. And you go around your family or your at-home friends, and everybody's asking you questions like, okay, what about this? What about this? And it's like, girl, you're asking me a lot and I'm just trying to figure it out. So I think as much as, graduation is a time for celebration and, moving on to the next phase of your life, it can also be a very depressing time because it's a huge transition. But overall, like I said, I love my experience at Hampton. I wouldn't change it for the world. Like they say, you meet people your freshman year and they'll have friends for a lifetime. Like, and that is so true. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't trade it for the world, especially because I was fortunate enough to go to NIH. Like, and I talk about that a lot because I'm a big nerd. Like NIH was like, I flourished. I was so excited. It was a good time. But
and I will say, like, I'm proud because like Taylor had lemons and made lemonade. She even got a made some strawberry lemonade. Got fancy.
Strawberry lemonade. We getting fancy out here.
Yes. So I say I'm proud because it's like right after she graduated, that's when the pandemic came. What?
Next year.
Yeah, that following year, I believe.
Yeah, like the end of 2019 into 2020. So it was like, and then even with the pandemic, like the job market started to crash because everybody was supposed to go out here and get jobs. They were at home. So it was kind of like her class, especially 2020 after her, that was the class where it was like, what we gonna do? Because nobody ever prepared us for a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right.
So I really think like seeing how far they've come, like I know some people from her class and classes behind her, they're starting to get their jobs and they're moving and things like that. So I was just like, I applaud y'all because had that been me, I'd be like, okay, well, we just gonna try again after the whole vaccine thing is over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can relate to that too. Like the questions people ask, like, when are you gonna start your teaching internship? When are you gonna graduate? What school do you want to teach at? And it's like, I don't know. I'm just trying to get through the semester right now.
I just graduated. Give me a second.
Yeah, it's just like I try my best not to be rude with people. It's like, so when you gonna do this? Like, I'm trying to figure this out as it comes. I don't know. Like I know I'm gonna do it. I just don't know when. But it's like, sometimes it's just like y'all asking me these questions.
Yeah,
I don't
know. And they're loaded
just
questions. You're like, ma'am, I'm winging it just like you.
Like,
exactly.
I have a plan. We'll see if it works. If not, we'll focus on that later.
Right.
Yeah.
As this year is progressing along, I was going to say coming to a close, but we're halfway through the year.
Yeah.
But as this year continues to progress, what are some of the things that you both would like to accomplish this year?
So going into senior year, one of my big goals that I want to accomplish is, of course, graduating on time, thank the Lord. Also, graduate school. That's one of my biggest things on my list right now. And it's like right now, I don't care where I go, as long as I'm accepted somewhere because it's very competitive. Also, going back to school because we just found out we're going back on campus. I just want to just do all the things I didn't get a chance to do. I really think being at home from college, you realize there's a lot of stuff I just never got to do, especially like doing different organizations. Because my friends were like, when we go back on campus, we joined everything because we missed out. But and some of that stuff is starting to come into fruition. Like being on academic probation freshman year, I really felt like that just weeded out my chances to do anything. Because at Hampton, like for some organizations, you have to have a certain GPA. So now that my GPA is well above what I need, now it's like I can actually do things. So just, grad school is one, doing different organizations and just basically doing what I want to do after Hampton. Because I know graduation next year will be here before I know it. So that's one of my big things.
Okay, so I'm at Meharry right now and I'm finishing up my master's. So I think finishing up my master's, applying to med school, that is a journey in and of itself. So I'm excited for it because, it's one of those things where you're that close to your dreams. So it's like, I'm really excited, but I'm also really anxious. So I think by the end of this year, going into my by the end of this year, I'll be like in my last year of my graduate school, applying to med school, continuing in therapy, and just making sure like there's a work-life balance. I think that's some of my goals for this year.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm trying to get to my 100th episode. I know I'll get there like by either June or July. I'll get to that point. But, get to that point and then just keep taking care of myself. You know, a lot of things always come at us as life goes on. So just taking care of myself and going with the flow with everything.
Yeah.
And keeping up with my relationship with God, keeping him close.
That's important.
Yep. And so my last question to you before I go ahead and let y'all go and wrap this up is, if you could offer a piece of advice to your old selves when y'all were younger, what would you say to that old Taylor and Madison?
It's not your fault, and it's going to be okay. Because a lot of the times, looking back at myself in high school especially, I just really thought that just certain things that were out of my control was my fault. And I saw a future for myself, but I didn't see myself in the future, if that makes sense. So I really would just tell myself it's okay. You have to really trust yourself and find yourself. And I think that I didn't realize those things until I got older and more mature, and I didn't come until college. But I would just give myself a hug and just say, it's going to be okay. Because there were some times I would never have thought at 15, 16 years old that I would be in this position, like at Hampton, finding what I want to do, getting internships. Like, I just saw myself graduating high school and be like, well, I got out of high school, so what's next? So I think that's what I would tell myself. And also that you don't have to have everything figured out. Because I thought at that age I had to have my whole life figured out. And then you realize, like, especially at our age, we're 21 years old. You're just like, I don't have everything figured out. I don't have the answers to everything. And I always thought as a teenager, like, well, my parents have this figured out. This person had this figured out. And I had to realize when they were my age, they just had to learn by experience, same as I'm doing. So that's my advice I would tell myself.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's breathe. Breathe. It's going to be okay. You'll get there. It might not look like how you wanted it to look, but it will eventually. I use the analogy of a lot of like, sometimes your experiences are, you have like an attic view. And it comes from like the parable. Ironically, it's a biblical parable. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the one that was like, this man, he was sick and he was trying to get to God, and he like took him to the front door, the back door, the side door, but then like it wasn't until he got to the attic. And I really didn't understand it as a kid, but I think now that I'm older, it's not that, he didn't belong where Jesus was, or he didn't belong at that place. That just wasn't where he was supposed to come in at. And it didn't dawn on me till recently, when you have an attic view, you kind of see everything that's going on before you get there. And by the time you come in through the attic, you're right where you're supposed to be. So I kind of had to take that parable and be like, sometimes when it doesn't happen the way you want it to happen, your bidding set up so that way when you get there, it comes natural. And you're right where you need to be so that way you can flourish. So I think that's another thing I tell myself. I tell myself, you're worthy of everything you want to. Don't think because, oh my God, it was hard, or, this person has this qualification or whatever. Like, you're worthy and you deserve to be every place, every dream, every goal. You're worthy of it. So I think I definitely tell myself that. Yeah,
I tell myself to just, chill out and just allow life to happen and keep God first place. Because I had a lot of fears and worries about how my future would pan out and turn out. Like, I never thought, like 17, 18-year-old me never would have imagined I'd have a podcast sitting here interviewing all these different people and stuff like that, publishing a book and stuff. Like, I never would have imagined this stuff happened. But
and it's like, well, life will take you. You just life is but a dream, because it's just like I said before, I would have never thought that I would just be in the position that I'm in today. And it's just like, it's somebody, and I'm glad that I went through those struggles. Because if somebody would have told me, you be in this position at 15 or 16 years old, I would have been so arrogant, be like, I don't have to work hard for anything because I already know what I'm going to do. But it's like coming into college, being scared, having to almost get kicked out of school, to working my way back up to this point. It's like, I appreciate that because now I know what it feels like to have to be patient with God, have to work hard for things. Because if it comes easy, I don't want it. I want to know that I worked hard to get to where I need to be. So it's just like, you know, and it's like you're afraid of your future, what's going to happen. It just shows you're passionate about it because you want to make sure you get to where you want to be at in life. So,
and that's the beautiful thing about life. You never thought you'd be that person that was in like these type of predicaments. But I think that's beautiful because you know what it's like to go through hardships. You appreciate the flowers and the trees and the roses and your accomplishments, you know?
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than you working hard for something and you don't even get a chance to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
it's like that's your testimony for somebody else who's in my same position.
Yeah, for someone who's coming up behind you. Because especially like they look at us. Like, they're like, oh my God, like, it's y'all look like y'all have it all figured out. No, girl.
No.
I had to work to get here.
Right.
And it shows, like, people coming up behind us, like, we can do it too. Like, oh, well, like, you didn't have to struggle. Yes, I did. And you're going to have to struggle too, but that's okay. But you'll appreciate the end goal.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like people think like, oh my God, you're struggling. It's like sometimes you have to appreciate your struggle because it's like, I will honestly say, like, going through the struggles I did in college, it humbled me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got humbled numerous times in college. And I'm not ashamed to say, like, sometimes I needed that moment so I could realize you don't have the answers to everything. You can't outsmart this. You can't outsmart that. You're going to actually have to go through this. You may not like it. But at the end, I was like, I appreciate it because it's like, had I not gone through that, I would have never known what it felt like to actually be happy, especially like the small accomplishments. Because people's like, you're happy because I'm like, yes, girl, because 2 or 3 semesters ago, I couldn't even do this, but now I can do it. So it's just like, you learn to appreciate the small things, especially your small accomplishments in college.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank y'all so much for appearing on the show. I appreciated this conversation. Love to do another one. Maybe have Shayla if she comes home. We do that. But yeah, thank y'all once again. This wraps up the episode. Stay blessed and stay encouraged.